Welcome to this explainer, where today we're decoding a really fascinating piece of source material focused on environmental policy down in the Buenos Aires Province. Now, this analysis holds the key to one of the absolutely most pressing questions of our time, right? How do we harmonize economic progress with ecological preservation? And, while we're looking at a specific Argentine region today, the bureaucratic maze and the really innovative solutions proposed here, they're deeply relevant to literally anywhere in the world that's trying to manage rapid industrial growth.
To really grasp the historical urgency here, we actually have to go all the way back to May 1st, 1974. Then President Juan Domingo Perón stood before the Legislative Assembly and issued what was honestly a surprisingly modern warning. He spoke of this urgent need for a mental revolution, especially in highly industrialized countries, to basically halt a march toward human disaster. He famously stated, "We must transform the prison cities of the present into the garden cities of the future." So this wasn't just some fringe idea, It was framed as absolutely essential for our very survival.
And that brings us right to the core question driving this entire analysis. How do we balance industrial growth with environmental survival? Honestly, it's the ultimate tightrope walk. On one hand, we need industries to create jobs, drive the economy, and sustain local communities. But if those industries completely degrade the air, soil, and water, well, that economic growth actually becomes a fast track to disaster.
Okay, so to navigate this legal labyrinth, here's our roadmap. We're going to look at the environmental challenge, the legal framework, the clash between the OPDS and municipalities, local power, and finally, the sustainable future. Let's dive right into Section 1, the environmental challenge.
Moving beyond those historical warnings from the 70s, modern public policy has really had to adapt and create tangible, actionable strategies to turn those garden cities into a reality. The thing is, public policies often fail when they treat the economy, society, and the environment as completely isolated issues. The secret to bridging these gaps? It's a concept called clean production. Basically, clean production is a preventative strategy against contamination. It's all about generating sustainable development by baking the environmental dimension right into the economic model from the get-go. So, by identifying and decreasing the environmental costs of the economy early on, rather than just, trying to clean up the mess later, long-term growth actually becomes sustainable. Which leads us to Section 2, the legal framework.
Because to enforce clean production, you need some serious legal teeth. And the mid-90s were a massive turning point for environmental law in Buenos Aires. First, in 1994, a constitutional reform firmly established the right of all inhabitants to a healthy environment and the duty to protect it. That same exact year, the Industrial Settlement Law was passed to focus specifically on industrial regulations. Then, just a year later, the General Environmental Act was enacted, mandating that any project potentially affecting the environment absolutely must undergo an environmental impact assessment. Suddenly, the right to a healthy environment was codified, which gave authorities the mandate to step in and regulate.
All right, Section 3, OPDS versus municipalities.
So, having laws on the books is one thing, right? But enforcing them, that's a whole different story. Who actually knocks on the factory door? Think of it this way. The Provincial Agency for Sustainable Development, or the OPDS, is the big umbrella authority. They plan and execute environmental policy for the whole province. But the municipalities, the local city and town governments, they're the boots on the ground. The General Environmental Act actually mandates decentralized execution, meaning local governments are supposed to be the frontline defense, guaranteeing environmental rights in their own backyards.
But here's the crucial point. There is some serious legal friction between the original law and its restrictive regulatory decree. The Industrial Settlement Law states that municipalities can grant environmental aptitude certificates and handle the oversight of Category 1 and 2 industrial establishments. Sounds like complete local empowerment, right? Well, hold on. A regulatory decree passed later added a massive hurdle. It dictated that for municipalities to actually exercise these powers, they must first sign a formal delegation agreement with the OPDS, and this created a massive province-wide administrative bottleneck.
When you look at the sheer density of the comparative analysis between the original law and the new decree from the source material, the problem becomes completely obvious. You don't even need to read every single line to see that it is an absolute labyrinth of dense legalese, categorizations, and procedural roadblocks. Local governments literally have to navigate this entire maze just to get the permission to police their own industrial zones. It's wild. Now for Section 4, local power. To solve this macro-level mess, researchers propose a micro-level solution, cutting through the red tape and really decentralizing authority. Because this stat vividly illustrates the urgency of the problem. A shocking 11%. Out of 135 municipalities in the Buenos Aires Province, only 11% actually hold these vital delegation agreements for Category 2 and 3 establishments. So, what does that mean? It means nearly 90% of local governments are essentially sidelined by bureaucratic hurdles, just waiting on the provincial umbrella to handle local enforcement.
The actual data reveals a pretty grim picture. Out of the entire sprawling province, only 15 municipalities have agreements for Category 2 control, and only 2, Avellaneda and Bahia Blanca, for Category 3. But what's even more alarming is who's dangerously missing from this list. Major, heavy-hitting industrial hubs like San Martin do not have these agreements in place. No way around it. That's a huge gap in oversight.
So, rather than a blanket approach, the solution requires targeted, strategic decentralization. Fixing the roof where it's leaking the most. By classifying municipalities based on their productive features, we get a clear action plan. Level A are the 11% that already have agreements. Level B are the urgent ones, municipalities with heavy industrial profiles that critically need power delegated to them to protect their local environment. And Level C? Those are strategic targets, places with the potential to become future industrial poles, where environmental oversight should be proactively established before the factories even arrive.
Finally, Section 5, the sustainable future.
Let's zoom back out to the macro view for a second. Empowering local governments is not just an administrative shuffle of paperwork. When local inspectors actually have the authority to grant certificates, control operations, and penalize infractions without waiting for provincial sign-off, enforcement is faster, tighter, and infinitely more effective. Decentralization really is the absolute key to achieving clean production. It perfectly aligns economic growth with immediate, localized environmental accountability.
As we look at the monumental task of preserving our environment while sustaining human progress, the evidence from Buenos Aires strongly suggests that until the boots on the ground are empowered to act, the umbrella is just going to keep leaking. So I'll leave you with this. Can true global sustainability only be achieved through local control? It's something to think about. Keep questioning the systems around you, and thanks for joining us for this explainer.